I think if I could go back to talk to myself 10 years ago at the beginning of this process, I think I would say being confused, being discouraged, having entire weeks where you don't know if the story is coming together at all of that is an important part of the process. That's, it might feel like you've lost your way. It might feel like the pages that you're putting out don't connect, and maybe they don't yet, but it's important to continue to show up, to continue to sit in front of that blank paper, and even if the muses aren't there that day, to struggle with it, to try and make those decisions about character and plot. That just and that counts as work. Being there and sitting in front of that blank page, being unable to summon the sentence, that counts as like an hour of writing. You're doing that work. And I think that the advice I would give to a new writer who is maybe just beginning their 10-year process, just sitting down and trying to get pages out, be patient with yourself, be kind with yourself, and acknowledge that a lot of the work of writing might not actually be writing.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have another author on the screen with me as we start, and I'm excited to get into this and talk about his journey and all the amazing things that are happening. We're going to share some resources as well for you as authors. And if you're listening today, we really appreciate you being here. Laurence is here with me. Laurence, welcome to the podcast. Nice to see you again. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about writing and my debut novel, Glamorous Failures. I'm just so grateful to be here and to be chatting with you and your audience.
And Glamorous Failures is by no means any indication of how this book is going to perform, because we think it's going to be amazing, right?
Yeah, I am very, very excited for this book. I've had some early readers come back to me. The response so far has been positive. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Good. Awesome. Okay, so first of all, for those listening, where are you in this great big world of ours?
Yes, I am in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada.
There you go. So you have two Canadians here on a podcast together. Nothing can go wrong, right? Nothing can go wrong with two Canadians together.
Absolutely. We'll try not to apologize too much.
Sorry about that. Yeah, we'll try not to do that and avoid as many A's as possible. Yeah. Anything else we can't do on a podcast? I'm not sure.
No, I think we can be pretty restrained and controlled. I think we can make this work.
Apparently, Canadians are polite, so we'll have to live up to that as well, apparently.
Well,
we can do whatever we want, right? Okay. Yeah. So two Canadians on a podcast. It sounds like a joke that you were going to be saying after that, but no, this is no joke. Laurence is here. He's a real life author. Tell me, what does it feel like to put a book out into the world? Excitement, nervousness. What does it feel like?
Yeah, it's both of those things. This book was a labor of love. I have been developing it and writing it and rewriting it, revising it and editing it for upwards of 10 years. So From my mid-20s to now. And to finally have connected with local publishing collective that was enthusiastic about the project, and to have it now out in the world and available and being read, it's unlike any experience I've ever had. I feel maybe more myself than I ever have. It's a wonderful feeling, Dave.
You put something out into the world, right? And it's a piece of you. Right. Yeah. It's like 10 years to write what you've written. I hear about these courses where you can write a book in 30 days. And I'm like, I don't know, when I hear people like you come on the show and talk about the journey of writing a book and how long it's taken. And it just seems like it's deeper. There's a deeper well that you're drawing from over that period of time. The book's going to change and grow with you as you write it. I'm excited to see the response from people as they pick up the copy for the first time.
Yeah, me too. And every writer has their own process. Every book is different. Every approach to writing is different. There is I'm sure amazing work that's come out of those intensive sessions where you're able to just dedicate yourself for 30 days and
Yeah.
produce a singular object. For me, the process for this book that's expanded over so much time, I feel that no one's the same person that they were 10 years ago than they are today.
Right.
I feel that I can look back on this and it's almost like the book is wiser than I am or was at any point in those 10 years because it's got the wisdom and perspective of who I was at 25 and 26 and 27 all the way up. And the final product is more than I ever could have been in any one of those moments.
Amazing. So tell us more about the book. What is the general premise of the book? What are we going to find when we open the covers?
Yeah. So Glamorous Failures for the people that are watching the podcast, I'll just put it up on the screen here.
Yes, nice.
It's a fiction book. I've been describing it as a hopepunk dramedy. It's about these groups of characters and they move in and out of each other's lives. They bounce off of one another. They impact one another. They fall in love with one another. They betray one another. They all want to contribute meaningfully to the world. They all believe that a better world is possible and they are pursuing that change in a variety of different ways. And we watch as they reach within themselves and out into the world and try to affect change that will touch the lives of not only the people they care about, not only those around them, but of as many people as they can. And given the title Glamorous Failures, none of them succeeds in the way they expect. But this journey of trying and we watch what that sincere commitment to yourself and to the things that you hold dear, what that can mean to you when you live up to those ideas or try to. So it's a little vague, but I'm just trying to touch on some of the big themes and maybe we'll go into more detail.
Yeah. Okay. So, and one thing we want to do today as well, which I'm excited about, is you're going to actually read a portion to us in a few minutes, which I love when authors read to us from their books, because I love audiobooks for the prime reason that when an author reads their own book, the inflection, the accents, the emphasis that they put into their readings when they read it to me, I can hear them pause in a certain spot, add some emphasis here and there, and you really get a picture of what the author was intending when they wrote the words down. Because when you look at a paper copy of a book, it's open to interpretation, right? Yeah. And you can hear inflection, you can hear sarcasm, you can hear wit. All of that comes out when you speak those words out loud and read it to us. So I'm looking forward to that. Speaking of that, then, is there an audio version of this book in the plans as well?
Yes. So I've actually, that's been feedback that I've received from a number of different people, is the importance of having an audiobook version. It is something that I would really like to do. I'm thinking about releasing it in a podcast format, chapter by chapter, to really enjoy building suspense. There's been a long tradition of sort of publishing books episodically, and maybe there's something to publishing these audiobooks episodically, one chapter a week. I haven't really narrowed down exactly how I want to release the audio format, but there is one in store. There is one in the future. It's important from an accessibility perspective, of course, but I love what you're saying, Dave, about being able to capture all the little inflections and tones and cadences that
right.
Maybe I intended, but don't always necessarily come across to every reader in the written format.
I love voice actors. I've had them on the show as well, but they're kind of at a little disadvantage when it's not their words. They're just reading it to us, right? And I just think it's something special when you can hear it in the author's voice. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to having that in a few minutes around the podcast where you're going to read to us. That's exciting. Talk a little bit about the process and what you learned as a author in the process over 10 years of writing this? How have you grown as a person through the process?
Yeah. So the process was fairly intense. So I've been working, full time for that entire 10-year period. And so a lot of this writing process has been carving out carving out time, little chunks of it, a couple hours here, a couple hours there, in and around working in human services, working as a roofer, um, working in kitchens and bars, and those little stolen hours, those carved out moments that I reserve for what I hope for what is precious to me and for what I hope is the best of me, has been, extremely challenging but extremely rewarding. The process of writing this book, um, those moments sitting down with just the page and the pen and expressing it uh, were a deep learning experience. This is my first novel. I'd written short stories. I'd written nonfiction. I'd had little publications here and there, but a project of this scale, I felt like I was learning every day, and I was constantly making mistakes that I would have to go back and redo. And I was very fortunate to have some really brilliant editors that helped me um, shade and contextualize and recontextualize and address some of the errors and problems. I can't speak enough to how rewarding it was to find those editors, to find those, kindred spirits who were much smarter than I was, but who were interested enough in this project to share their time and their insight with me and help me, make this project uh, reach reach its potential, to make this project be realized. Um, so a 10-year process like that, very extensive, a lot's involved, and there was a lot of deep learning. Um, I think maybe my biggest takeaway is, although writing appears solitary and many think of it as a lonely activity, it thrives with community. It thrives with connection.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you found that community and connection through your publishing group and all of that. Is that what you're referring to there?
Yeah, the publishing group did help, but connecting with those editors was a huge piece, and also writing with other people. I found it really effective to set time in group writing sessions. It's easy to come home from work and, oh, I've got to shower, oh, I'm really too tired, and maybe I'll just watch some TV. But if you have a group of people that are also writers, that are also excited to work on their projects, and you say, Thursday afternoon, rain or shine, no matter how tired I am, I'm going to the cafe and I'm going to do some writing.
Yeah.
That community of dedicated creative people was, and finding and forming and reforming that over and over again as I moved from cities, and um, form new friend groups. That was so important to how this book came together. And then recently, getting connected with the Open Apartments Collective,
Mhm.
and getting plugged into this community of creative people from all sides of creative work, poets and musicians and other writers, and being plugged into their work and seeing creative people believe in each other's work enough to work together to make it real, to publish books, to host events. Like, just it was inspiring. If there's anything I would encourage sort of an aspiring writer to do, it would be to find your people, find your community. um, it it only looks lonely, it doesn't need to be.
Sort of wise words. And it's not just about going into a community to receive support, but it's
Hmm.
there for you to give support as well,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. And reading other people's work and helping them find their way is an incredibly educational experience. You'll often notice things in other people's work that you have been blind to in your own work for a long time. It makes you a sharper critic and better editor of your own work as well.
So when you hand off your writings to an editing team, how nervous are you that key points of what you've written might be edited or changed or tweaked, and you're like, oh, everyone loves their baby, everyone loves their work that you've created. It just seems a little daunting to put that in front of somebody and have them critique your work. I know it's helpful, but it's got to be a little bit traumatic for you. How does that feel?
Oh yeah, to put your own work under a microscope, all this vulnerability you've put into a book, and to have it come back and have all the red marker all over it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think, it's important to be psychologically prepared to like have a day where you immediately reject all the feedback, decide that your editor is an idiot, and and
Yeah.
stomp your feet. But knowing that that's part of a healthy process for a lot of people, to be able to come back afterwards and reflect on it, and know that that momentary reaction is just that, it's just in the moment. I haven't agreed with everything every editor has told me, and I haven't incorporated every piece of feedback into the book, but I have learned from every piece of feedback. I have learned about writing and reading and readers, with every note and comment an editor has been generous enough to gift me.
So, what do you think is the most difficult part of the writing process? Is it the actual writing process, the editing process, or the promotion of your book? What's most challenging for you?
Oh man, those are three very different
Yeah.
three very different hats you put on
Hmm.
at different stages of it. Promotion for me is probably the space I'm least comfortable in. It's
Okay.
not. I don't have a professional background in promotion. I'm not a huge social media guy, but I'm learning a lot, and I'm kind of the process isn't daunting or intimidating to me. It's but I'm enjoying the learning curve. I think in terms of just raw difficulty, um, it's consistency, to be able to continually show up as often as you can, whether that's once a week or every day, or even just every couple of weeks if you're going through a tough time. Um, that that consistently showing up for this project for yourself is really difficult to maintain. It takes a discipline and a passion that um, it's hard. It's
Hmm.
hard.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, so let's jump into the book and talk about this more. I would love to, if you can, if we can do that, is to share that portion that you had already predetermined for us to hear on the podcast. Again, I'm looking forward to this. But can we start with that? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to read from chapter 10 in the book, and we are. I chose it because it stands alone pretty well, but it gives you a taste for the tone of the work. So I'm just going to jump right in. I want to tell you about Doc and Gil. Doc and Gil traced their friendship back into the distant reaches of childhood. Many people, especially city people, are not blessed with the happiness of a friendship built over decades. Still fewer enjoy the rare experience of actually liking those childhood friends. For many of us, contact with our oldest friends is not maintained out of any feeling of genuine affection or shared pleasure, but rather a sense of habit or obligation. For others, old friends are kept around because they are witnesses to our own past. These relationships function as living proof that the past existed as we imagine it did. We keep these people in our lives to remind ourselves that we were, in fact, the person we believe we were, and could, should circumstances permit, return to that life if we so chose. Other times, lifelong friendships are nothing more than superstitious talismans held to ward off the twin demons of time and change. The same jokes are repeated endlessly, the same stories told, the same spots visited over and over again. These friendships create the illusion of stasis. They assure us that we never stopped being the person we were. They allow us to pretend that the effects of past and future can be eschewed through a white knuckle commitment to the way things ought to be. Fortunately, neither Gil nor Doc thought much about the past and the future. It was of little consequence to them that Gil earned his high school diploma only because Doc had been so clever at devising ways for Gil to cheat. They didn't talk about the old days when they lived in the same complex of inward-looking low-rises. Likewise, it was never mentioned that Doc had always been welcome to sleep on the couch in Gil's childhood home when Doc's unemployed single father couldn't keep the lights on in their insect-infested one-bedroom apartment in the Regent Park Estates. They didn't talk about Gil's mother, who worked a job at a payday loan company and was able to keep a little food in the fridge and made sure the furniture never caught the neighborhood bedbugs. They didn't tell one another stories from their shared history. Both Doc and Gil were creatures of the present. They rarely discussed anything beyond the temporal radius of a single week. This was an unspoken policy, but it was fastidiously observed. The limited range of conversation worked well. Much was shared without needing to be said. This facet of the friendship was on display the day Gil moved in. There was no pomp or circumstance or even request for permission. On that cold November day, Gil simply showed up on the crowded street outside Doc's apartment, soaking wet and barefoot. It had been a bad day. Gil had been walking the city streets, 2 thin garbage bags in either hand. It was a breakup that had done it. Another one. And this time, not only did he have no credit, no references, and no girlfriend, but his own dear mother probably wouldn't take him in. Well, probably. Gil considered the idea. He'd have to make all sorts of promises about sobriety and keeping good company and looking for honest work and all sorts of other upright nonsense that he couldn't be expected to follow through on. The trouble with making these promises was not that he would break them. Gil had no compunction about his many broken promises. The trouble was that Gil actually liked his mom. He would prefer to bring neither lies nor unnecessary chaos into her life. She just didn't seem to enjoy them as much as he did. It would be much better to move in with a friend. Mom could always be a last resort. But who would that lucky friend be? Obviously, a woman friend would be preferable. But at 27, Gil didn't have many woman friends left. He tried anyway. He used a payphone of all the indignities. He called exes and ex-friends and ex-coworkers. He played up his sob story. He twisted up his voice to sound genuine and vulnerable. On his last quarter, he even tried Melissa, the woman who had just kicked him out. But alas, each and every one of them had known better. One of them had even gone so far as to get married since she last spoke with Gil. Well, why are you wasting my time then? Gil screamed into the receiver before slamming it down repeatedly with loud, satisfying plastic on plastic thuds. Broke, penniless, worse than penniless, Gil mused to himself as he extracted his belongings from the phone booth, wincing at the thought of the $10,000 of debt the bank had sold to an aggressive collection agency. He pushed that uncomfortable remembrance into a cavern in the back of his mind, a place he reserved for thoughts that stubbornly refused to be forgotten. He kept the knowledge of an outstanding warrant for his arrest in Montreal in that cavern, as well as a whole series of memories of his father. He sat himself down on the curb. The busy intersection was thick with exhaust, pedestrians, and the smell of garbage. Disjointed conversations, car horns, and the sounds of shoes clicking on concrete filled the air. Resting his elbows on his knees and folding his arms over each other, Gil closed his eyes and let his head fall. He became still. He let the sounds and smells wash over him. He unburdened himself of the uncertainty, the precarity of his circumstances, and searched inward for his own heartbeat. If only he could find it, he knew he'd be all right. Concentrating, he focused on the sensations of his body. Searching past the pain in his feet and the ache in his shoulders, he felt his breath, the poisoned air passing through his nostrils, through his trachea, filling his lungs, and there it was, his heartbeat. He turned all his attention to the rhythmic thump, thump, until it occupied all his mental space. Minutes passed in this way, his head resting on his folded arms in the middle of downtown at rush hour. He was a strange inversion of the monk who meditates on the river's edge, but stranger still, it worked. When Gil raised himself up, he was convinced of the only thing that truly mattered. He was alive. A wave of calm rippled from within. It spread to the tips of his fingers and the soles of his dirty feet. He felt at peace with who he was and the choices he'd made. He felt the knot in his chest begin to unravel. It was a rare and sacred feeling, accessible only to those who, from their earliest days, have had to soothe themselves. And then it began to rain. And that's a good place to leave it.
Wow. Okay, so thank you, first of all, A, B, you just proved my point that how much I love audiobooks. Hearing that one portion, you're just like, and you're like going and going and going and going. I'm like trying to keep up with holding my breath as you're, wow. So that's exactly what I was talking about. I love that.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And, you know, that's the voice I have for Gil in my head. I'm sure other readers have other voices for him, but that's how he sounds to me.
Okay. I can see the pride written all over your face for your book. Again, I want to go back there. What does this mean for you to have this piece of you now that you can put your hand on and open and read like you just did? What does this mean for you?
Yeah, I think for a lot of writers, it's hard to think of yourself as to give yourself permission to call yourself a writer. I think a lot of us toil for a long time, you know, on Word documents, with, you know, collecting PDFs on our desktop, and we create these artificial barriers to ourselves before we can give ourselves permission to take on that mantle. You know, I need to be sustaining myself off of my writing before I'm authentically a writer. I need to have a publishing company approve me. I need a literary agent. But you know, I think that's artificial. I know so many people that I've met, so many writers in my day who are writers, um, and struggle with giving themselves that title. And I think I fall prey to that as well. I think that having this book, out in the world now has let me move past that neuroses, and has allowed me to, given myself permission to think of myself as a writer in a way that I couldn't before. And I would encourage any writer listening to not wait for that. I think as long as you're writing, as long as you are writing, you are a writer. Don't wait for whatever psychic boundary you've placed upon yourself to be met. You are a writer. Give yourself permission to believe that.
Love it. And the other thing I've heard from another author was you can't edit a blank page. So you have to start writing. You have to put the words on paper or into your computer, however you're writing. You have to have something to edit. So if you wait for everything to be perfect and you never write anything down because you're just planning, you can't move to the next step without the first step. And that's to start, right?
That's so true. And one of my literary heroes is George Sanders, and he emphasizes over and over again the importance of revision. Revision for George, and I think this is something I agree with, is the essence of writing. I mean, even Shakespeare had an editor, right? You need to be willing to have that completely sloppy, dissatisfying, frustrating first draft, so that you can do the archaeology, the refinement, however you think of it, necessary to create that final product. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what you're saying about the importance of actually getting something out there so that you can edit.
It speaks to life in general. You have to put it out there. You have to, whatever you're working on, writing, whatever, music, whatever you're creating, you just need to put it out into the world and let it live. Let it breathe, take feedback, build community around it, and then just let it happen, right? And that's what I love that. I love it. It's amazing. Okay, so new authors listening right now, they're at the beginning of their 10-year journey of writing a book. They're at the beginning of writing something. Again, from your knowledge and from what you've gained from writing your own work, some words of encouragement. Again, you've given us many already, but what else have we not touched on that's meaningful for you that could help another author?
Yeah. I think if I could go back to talk to myself 10 years ago at the beginning of this process, I think I would say, being confused, being discouraged, having entire weeks where you don't know if the story is coming together at all of that is an important part of the process. Um, that's, it might feel like you've lost your way. It might feel like the pages that you're putting out don't connect, and maybe they don't yet, but it's important to show up, to continue to sit in front of that blank paper, and even if the muses aren't there that day, to struggle with it, to try and make those decisions about character and plot. Um that 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 just and that counts as work. Being there and sitting in front of that blank page, being unable to summon the sentence, that counts as like an hour of writing. You're doing that work. And I think that the advice I would give to a new writer who is maybe just beginning their 10-year process, just sitting down and trying to get pages out, be patient with yourself, be kind with yourself, and acknowledge that a lot of the work of writing might not actually be writing.
I'm imagining you sitting in a small little cafe, working on your book, the little ding of the bell as the door opens, and the characters from your book come in and sit down beside you. What would you say to them, and what would they say to you?
I'm so sorry I did all those terrible things to you.
It would be interesting to meet your characters in real life and have them sit beside you.
Yeah.
I actually had one author say she got to a point writing where she stalled and she didn't know what was next, but it felt like her character reached out to her from the page and started directing her in the story. And she was almost like following the character's lead instead of leading the character. And I'm like, I can imagine that. I can see it. And she went in a different direction than she had planned because her character took her there. And I love that visual and that picture of that happening. Were you led at all by your characters during the process?
God, those moments are so, so beautiful. I wouldn't say I had a one-to-one experience, but of having the characters appear and guide me through. But there are definitely moments where in the writing process where I felt that the story had taken on a momentum of its own, and it was telling itself, and it had its own inevitability built into it. And those moments are rare. So to those new writers, know that it's a little bit like a runner's high. Those are cherished moments when you can grab them at after put in that when you've pushed yourself. But when you do get them, you feel connected to something, and it's like, how do I explain it? It just feels like the story is working. The parts are like it's got an internal engine that's moving on its own accord. It just feels you feel aligned as you're producing work in that state in a way that's beautiful and energizing. And I don't really have a great way to describe it other than it's beautiful. It's a wonderful place to be when the story starts unfolding in front of you.
And as you're saying that, that's the first word that came to my mind. It sounds like a beautiful process to both be actively involved in as the writer, but also to follow the story as a fan of the story as well. You're playing both in the process.
That's right? A great point. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Yes. So the book is available everywhere, right?
Yes.
And we want people to go there and get that. Talk just a little bit more about Open Apartment Publishing Collective, because I think there's a potential of having some people from that organization here with us in the future, but to set them up well. Just tell me the benefit of that group and a little bit more about them as well. I'd love to hear more.
Absolutely. So the Open Apartment Publishing Collective is a local micro publisher. It's again a group of creatives within the city of Edmonton that have come together to support each other's projects and get them over the line and out there. I am their second full length novel that they have produced. The first was by a writer named Joe Gerba, whose work is really inspiring. It's a very different direction than mine, but it is a blazing light. His work. I'm so inspired by Joe. They have there's a lot of advantages with going with micro publishers like that. You retain full ownership of your work for one. Good. And you're leveraging local networks. So my books now sit on shelves in Edmonton and Calgary. We're working on getting distribution in Toronto and Vancouver as well. I'm confident that we'll see them up in the coming weeks.
Nice.
And you're plugging into talent. So I was able to develop video for this book. We did readings, and we were able to use that video to promote the book both before the release and after. There are a lot of options for new writers. There are all kinds of publishing companies all over the world right now, of different sizes and shapes, and you've got to consider, you've got to think closely about what you want when you're in that publishing stage. For me, being able to tap into a mutually supportive community, to lean in with a group of other creatives, and while retaining full ownership was the ideal. But I can easily see why other folks might want to go for more established publishing companies in their areas that have maybe more formal, more developed networks. It's ultimately a very personal decision. I really enjoy the process I took. I wouldn't have gone another way.
Good. What's next for you, Laurence? What's coming down the road?
Yeah, I've got a collection of short stories that I've been working on. I'm really inspired by Thomas Ligotti. So they are a series of horror shorts. I'm going to be about 40,000 words in. I've got a couple of stories that I'm going to be submitting over the coming weeks and months. I'm hoping within a year, 18 months on the outside, to have it published as a collection of shorts.
Excellent. That's great. I love it. Okay. It's good. So as far as connecting with you, Laurence, and finding out more of you, following your journey, where are you most active? Where can we send people to connect?
So I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram. The place that I'm most active, if you're interested in following with my writing, is my Substack, lawrencebraunwoodbury.substack.com. I also have a website, lawrence.braunwoodbury.com, where you can reach out to me directly. If you'd like to order a copy of the book, that's the best way to do it, is on the website. It's also available on Amazon in a Kindle format. And stay tuned for the audiobook.
Yes, for sure. And potentially a podcast around it.
Yes.
That's unique as well. There's so many ways to interact with your content. I love it. We'll make sure we have links for everything in the show notes so that everyone can come directly to you. Laurence, first of all, thank you for opening the book and reading from your book today. It's meaningful for me as a host to hear your work. Thank you for being so willing to share that with us. That was beautiful. And I really want to just thank you for being part of the podcast. I hope that our paths don't end here, that we can continue the conversation and continue to follow your journey as an author.
And thank you so much, Dave, for creating space for me on your podcast. And thank you so much, listeners, for coming with us all the way to the end of this journey. Good luck to everybody listening who's working on their own projects, who's writing. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to listen to me today.
Excellent. We're all living the next chapter, Laurence. See how I tied that all together?
Oh, yeah.
We're living the next chapter. So thank you for living it with us. I really appreciate it, Laurence.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great day.
Everyone, check out the show notes. That's all the information's there for Laurence. Please go give him a great review. Tell your friends. Tell everyone to go pick up this book. And all the best to Quinoa the cat, who's quietly sleeping in the background. Thanks, Laurence, for being part of this.
Thanks.
Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show and you for listening this far. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow, helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.